Eddie Fastlane Johnson was enjoying the quiet hum of his ship, the Nebula Runner, as he cruised through the Orion sector. A seasoned interstellar trucker, Eddie was used to the long, lonely hauls through space. He had just finished a routine delivery of mining equipment to a remote asteroid colony and was looking forward to a few days of rest. His comm panel beeped, pulling him out of his daydream. "Incoming job request," the automated voice announced. Eddie glanced at the screen and frowned. The job was from the Galactic Fashion Consortium, a name he rarely saw on his list of clients. Curiosity piqued, he opened the message. "Urgent delivery, classified cargo, high payout." Eddie rubbed his chin. High payout usually meant high risk, but his bank account could use the boost. He accepted the job and set course for the pickup location, a shady space station known as Darkstar Port. As Eddie docked the Nebula Runner, a nervous-looking man in a sleek black uniform approached him. "You're Eddie Johnson?" the man asked, glancing around as if expecting trouble. "That's me," Eddie replied. "You got the cargo?" The man nodded and led Eddie to a secure area where several crates were waiting. "These trousers are prototypes for a revolutionary self-cleaning, self-repairing fabric. Top secret. Handle with care." Eddie raised an eyebrow. "Trousers? You called me out here for pants?" The man glared at him. "Not just any pants. These could change the fashion industry forever. Our competitors will do anything to get their hands on them." Eddie sighed and began loading the crates onto his ship. All right, where am I taking these?" "New Paris to the Galactic Fashion Expo. You need to be there in 3 days, no delays." With the cargo secured, Eddie launched the Nebula Runner back into space. He hadn't been flying for more than an hour when his sensors picked up a ship trailing him. "Looks like I've got company," he muttered to himself. Eddie tried a few evasive maneuvers, but the mysterious ship stayed on his tail. Frustrated, he hailed the ship. "This is Eddie Johnson of the Nebula Runner. State your business." Silence. Then a crackling voice came through. "Hand over the cargo and we won't have any trouble." Eddie's grip tightened on the controls. "Not happening, pal." The voice laughed. "Have it your way." Realizing he was in for a fight, Eddie punched the throttle and headed for the rogue planet of Zog. He knew an old friend there, a former smuggler named Kat, who might be able to help him shake off his pursuers. As Eddie approached Zog, the mysterious ship was still hot on his trail. He navigated through the planet's dense asteroid belt, hoping to lose his tail. The Nebula Runner weaved and dodged, but the pursuer was relentless. Finally, Eddie broke through the asteroid field and landed on Zog's surface. He quickly secured the cargo and rushed to find Kat. She was in a dingy bar, nursing a drink and chatting with some rough-looking characters. "Kat, I need your help," Eddie said, breathless. She looked up and smirked. "Eddie Johnson, what kind of trouble have you gotten yourself into this time?" "Big trouble," Eddie replied. "I've got a shipload of prototype trousers and some very determined thieves on my tail." Kat's eyes widened. "Prototype trousers? You never do things halfway, do you, Fastlane?" Eddie shrugged. "Can you help me or not?" Kat downed her drink and stood up. "Let's get to work." Eddie and Kat hurried back to the Nebula Runner, the sound of Kat's boots echoing through the narrow corridors of the spaceport. The mysterious ship that had been tailing Eddie had landed too, and they didn't have much time before its crew came looking for the cargo. "We need to move fast," Eddie said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Kat nodded. "Let's get those trousers hidden and spread some rumors. We'll send those thieves on a wild goose chase." They quickly unloaded the crates and stashed them in a concealed compartment beneath the ship's floor. Kat pulled out a small communicator and started sending out false leads to various sectors of the galaxy. Soon, every smuggler and pirate within 100 light-years would be chasing phantom shipments of prototype trousers. "That should keep them busy for a while," Kat said, a satisfied grin spreading across her face. But their relief was short-lived. A group of rough-looking thugs burst into the spaceport, scanning the area with sharp eyes. "There they are!" one of them shouted, pointing at Eddie and Kat. "Run!" Eddie yelled, grabbing Kat's hand and pulling her towards the Nebula Runner. They dashed up the ramp and sealed the hatch just as blaster fire rang out. Eddie scrambled to the cockpit and fired up the engines. The Nebula Runner roared to life, lifting off the ground and shooting into the sky. Kat manned the rear guns, returning fire at their pursuers. "Hang on!" Eddie shouted, steering the ship into a steep climb. They rocketed through the atmosphere, leaving the thugs behind. As they broke free of Zog's gravity, Eddie set a course for the nearest jump point. "We need to get out of this system before they call in reinforcements." Kat nodded, still keeping an eye on the sensors. "Agreed. Let's hope your false leads keep them distracted long enough for us to make the jump." Eddie punched in the coordinates and activated the hyperdrive. The stars stretched into lines as the Nebula Runner jumped to light speed, leaving Zog far behind. When they emerged from hyperspace, Eddie checked the scanners. No sign of pursuit. He let out a sigh of relief. "Looks like we lost them for now." Kat leaned back in her seat. "So, what's the plan? We can't keep running forever." Eddie rubbed his temples. "We need to get these trousers to New Paris. But the consortium's competitors won't give up that easily. We have to be smart about this." Kat thought for a moment. "I have some contacts in the fashion industry. Maybe we can get some help from them, create a diversion or something." Eddie nodded. "Sounds like a plan, but first we need to make sure these trousers stay hidden." They spent the next few hours securing the cargo and laying low, monitoring communications for any signs of trouble. Eddie's mind raced with possible strategies, knowing that one wrong move could spell disaster. Just as they were starting to relax, the comm panel beeped. Eddie answered it, his heart pounding. "This is Captain Voss of the Stellar Hunter. Surrender your cargo or be destroyed." Eddie glanced at Kat. "Looks like we didn't lose them after all." Kat gritted her teeth. "We'll have to fight our way out. Ready for some action, Fastlane?" Eddie tightened his grip on the controls. "Let's give 'em hell." The Nebula Runner dived and weaved as Eddie and Kat engaged in a fierce battle with the Stellar Hunter. Laser fire lit up the void, and explosions rocked both ships. Despite the odds, Eddie's skillful piloting and Kat's sharpshooting managed to outmaneuver the enemy. With a final, desperate burst of speed, they escaped the Stellar Hunter's range and jumped to hyperspace once more. Panting and exhausted, Eddie looked over at Kat. "We did it. But this isn't over." Kat nodded. "Not by a long shot. But we'll get those trousers to New Paris one way or another." Eddie and Kat emerged from hyperspace near the rogue planet of Zog. The planet's surface was a chaotic jumble of shantytowns and makeshift spaceports, a perfect place for them to lose their pursuers and regroup. "All right, we need to lay low and come up with a plan," Eddie said, guiding the Nebula Runner towards a hidden docking bay known only to the most seasoned smugglers. As they landed, a wiry man with a cybernetic eye approached. "Eddie Johnson, as I live and breathe. It's been a while," he said, offering a hand. "Good to see you, Scrap," Eddie replied, shaking the man's hand. "We need a favor. Got some trouble on our tail and some precious cargo to protect." Scrap nodded. "Follow me. We'll get you sorted." They followed Scrap through a labyrinth of narrow alleys and dimly lit corridors, eventually arriving at a secure hideout. "You can stash your cargo here," Scrap said. "And I've got a few friends who can help spread some disinformation." Kat and Eddie quickly transferred the prototype trousers to the hideout. Scrap activated a series of decoys, sending out signals and false leads that would keep their enemies guessing. "That should keep them busy for a bit," Scrap said, grinning. "But be careful. Zog is crawling with bounty hunters and spies. They won't be fooled for long." Just as they finished securing the cargo, an alarm blared. "Incoming ships!" Kat shouted, looking at the scanner. Eddie's heart sank. Their pursuers had tracked them to Zog. "We need to move now," he yelled. They grabbed their gear and dashed back to the Nebula Runner. As they approached the ship, a group of armed thugs blocked their path. "You thought you could hide from us?" the leader sneered. Eddie and Kat exchanged a quick glance. "We don't have time for this," Eddie muttered. "Kat, cover me." Kat drew her blaster and fired at the thugs, creating a distraction. Eddie sprinted towards the ship, firing up the engines. "Get in!" he shouted. Kat leaped into the ship, and Eddie hit the throttle, lifting off just as more thugs swarmed the area. The Nebula runner shot into the sky, dodging laser fire and weaving through the chaotic airspace. "We need to get to the jump point," Kat said, firing at their pursuers from the rear gunner seat. "Hold them off until then." Eddie pushed the ship to its limits, racing towards the coordinates for the jump. The Nebula runner took a few hits, but they managed to stay ahead of their enemies. Finally, they reached the jump point and Eddie activated the hyperdrive. "We need to get to the jump point," Kat said, firing at their pursuers from the rear gunner seat. "Hold them off until then." Eddie pushed the ship to its limits, racing towards the coordinates for the jump. The Nebula runner took a few hits, but they managed to stay ahead of their enemies. Finally, they reached the jump point, and Eddie activated the hyperdrive. "We need to get to the jump point," Kat said, firing at their pursuers from the rear gunner seat. "Hold them off until then." Eddie pushed the ship to its limits, racing towards the coordinates for the jump. The Nebula runner took a few hits, but they managed to stay ahead of their enemies. Finally, they reached the jump point, and Eddie activated the hyperdrive. They emerged from hyperspace in a remote part of the galaxy, the stars twinkling peacefully around them. Eddie slumped in his seat, exhausted. "We made it." Kat nodded, breathing heavily. "But we can't let our guard down. They'll keep coming." Eddie checked the navigation charts. "Next stop, New Paris. We need to get these trousers to the fashion lab before it's too late." They plotted their course and set off, the tension still thick in the air. As they neared New Paris, the sleek, shining metropolis came into view, a stark contrast to the lawless chaos of Zog. "Almost there," Eddie said, steering the ship towards the planet's surface. "Let's just hope our luck holds out." They landed at a private docking bay near the fashion lab, their nerves on edge. Eddie and Kat unloaded the cargo and made their way to the secure facility, the tension palpable. Inside, they were greeted by a group of anxious scientists and designers. "You have the trousers?" one of them asked, eyes wide with anticipation. "Right here," Eddie replied, opening the crates to reveal the precious cargo. The head scientist stepped forward, inspecting the prototypes. "Incredible. You've done us a great service. These trousers will revolutionize the industry." Eddie and Kat exchanged relieved smiles. They had made it through against all odds, and their mission was almost complete. But just as they began to relax, the door burst open, and a squad of armed mercenaries stormed in. "Hand over the cargo," their leader demanded, aiming a blaster at Eddie. Eddie's hand hovered near his own blaster. "Not a chance!" The room erupted into chaos as a fierce battle ensued. Eddie and Kat fought side by side, determined to protect the cargo they had risked so much for. The scientists and designers took cover, watching the battle with wide eyes. In the end, Eddie and Kat emerged victorious, the mercenaries either defeated or retreating. The head scientist stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "Thank you. You've saved our work." Eddie nodded. "Just doing our job." As they left the lab, Eddie looked at Kat. "We did it. One last jump and we're home free." Kat grinned. "Let's get these trousers to the expo and collect our reward." With their mission nearly complete, they boarded the Nebula runner and set course for the Galactic Fashion Expo, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With the coordinates set for New Paris, Eddie and Kat prepared for the final leg of their journey. They both knew the consortium's competitors wouldn't give up easily. As the Nebula runner hurtled through space, they fortified their defenses and reviewed their strategy. "All right, Kat," Eddie said, looking at the navigation charts. "We need to make this delivery without any more hitches. What's our best approach?" Kat leaned over the console, studying the map. "We take the asteroid belt here," she pointed, "and use it to mask our approach. It'll be risky, but it should help us avoid detection." Eddie nodded. "Let's do it." As they neared the asteroid belt, the ship's alarms blared. "Incoming ships," Kat announced, her voice tense. Eddie's heart sank. The scanners showed multiple hostile ships closing in fast. "Looks like they found us again." Kat tightened her grip on the weapons controls. "Get us through those asteroids, Eddie. I'll keep them off our tail." Eddie maneuvered the Nebula Runner into the dense field of floating rocks. The ship weaved and dodged, narrowly avoiding collisions as Kat fired at the pursuing ships. The asteroids provided some cover, but their enemies were relentless. "We can't keep this up forever," Eddie grunted, struggling with the controls. "Just a little longer," Kat urged. "I think I see a clearing up ahead." With a final burst of speed, they broke free of the asteroid belt, leaving the hostile ships struggling to navigate the dense rocks. Eddie steered the Nebula Runner towards New Paris, the bright lights of the city planet visible in the distance. "We made it," Eddie sighed, relief washing over him. "Not yet," Kat cautioned. "We still have to land and deliver the cargo." As they approached the high-security fashion lab, Eddie activated the ship's cloaking device. They touched down in a secluded docking bay, and Kat quickly unloaded the crates. "Let's get these trousers inside," Eddie said, grabbing a crate and heading for the entrance. They were met by a stern-faced security officer. "State your business." "Eddie Johnson, here to deliver a special cargo for the Galactic Fashion Consortium," Eddie replied, flashing his credentials. The officer scanned the credentials and nodded. "Follow me." They were led through a series of high-tech security checkpoints before finally arriving at the delivery point. A group of scientists and designers awaited them, excitement evident on their faces. "Are these the prototype trousers?" one of the designers asked eagerly. "All present and accounted for," Eddie confirmed, setting the crate down. The head scientist stepped forward. "You've done an incredible job, Mr. Johnson. These trousers are crucial for our presentation at the Galactic Fashion Expo." Eddie and Kat exchanged relieved smiles. "Just glad we could help," Kat said. As they left the lab, Eddie felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The job was done, and they had made it through against all odds. Back on the Nebula Runner, Eddie looked at Kat. "We did it. We actually did it." Kat grinned. "Yeah, we did. And now we've got a bit of fame to go along with our payday." Eddie chuckled. "Not a bad deal at all." They sat in the cockpit, watching the bustling cityscape of New Paris through the viewport. The danger had passed, and for the first time in days, they allowed themselves to relax. "What's next, Fastlane?" Kat asked, leaning back in her seat. Eddie shrugged, a smile playing on his lips. "Whatever comes our way, but first I think we deserve a good meal and a long rest." Kat laughed. "Couldn't agree more." As they prepared to leave for some well-deserved downtime, Eddie couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They had taken on a dangerous mission and come out on top. The Nebula Runner was ready for whatever the galaxy had in store next. And so were they. Subscribe to watch more amazing sci-fi stories. I shared new stories every day. Thanks for watching this sci-fi story.